Wonderful. Welcome everybody to Roy Talks. We are talking with our January artists. I want to start the evening, of course, as I always do, by thanking our sponsors, without whose support we would not be able to have events like this and in fact exhibitions in the gallery. Greater Columbus Arts Council, Ohio Arts Council, Encova Foundation, and the Columbus Foundation. Thank you also to our board members who help make programming like this possible as well with their gifts of time and treasure and talent. We appreciate that very much. Tonight's conversation is going to be recorded, and it'll be just that, a conversation amongst the artists about their work, where they're going, what's happening. We'll be listening and asking questions. You can as well. Please put any questions that you have in the chat, and I'll follow along on those to make sure that the artists are able to address them. And we'll begin the conversation with just some brief introductions and talk a little bit, maybe if you would, about how it is that you came to Roy. How did you know about Roy? And if you wouldn't mind starting us off tonight, Nicole, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I've known about Roy for a while. I'm a Columbus-based artist and an alumni of the Columbus College of Art and Design. So Roy kind of has a pretty big reputation at that college of just being like a really great gallery for emerging artists. And so I kind of knew about it as a space that shows contemporary work and applied because I like what's happening there. So it's been fun working with you.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who's next? Katherine?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Katherine Colbourn. I think I probably came to Roy in a similar fashion to Nicole. I've known about it for a long time. I'm an Ohio native. I grew up in Cleveland and came down to Cincinnati to do my undergraduate degree. I've kind of popped in and out of Columbus, having friends coming to, see different shows or just to be around the city. But I haven't actually ever lived there. So it's been a treat to be able to show work here at Roy. I think I've just known about it, again, as a contemporary space. I've actually waited a while before I felt comfortable applying with any kind of proposal, but this was a good time and I felt was appropriate. And so I've been very grateful to just kind of share in that space with other artists, get to know other people connected with this space. It's been a real joy to kind of meet all of these other artists and all the other people who've been coming to the openings or asking about the show. So it's been a really good experience.
Great. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Later, you'll fill out a comment card. We'll forward that to you.
And I'll write it all. Yeah.
Excellent. Nathan, if you'll continue the conversation.
Sure. Hello. I'm Nathan Byrne, and I'm one of the artists in this show. And let's see. I became aware of Roy G. Biv when a friend of mine, Choey, did a show last year. I met Choey at Vermont Studio Center and thought that that she had a great show, a great exhibition, and it looked like a fun place to kind of engage with. I'm going to be moving to the Columbus area probably early summer of 2022, and
Great.
So I'm just really grateful to get my foot in the door in the Columbus art scene and Ohio in general. And I just got my MFA at University of Michigan Stamp School of Art and Design, and a lot of I guess there's a lot of like OSU adjacent or like former current students that show at Roy that I've noticed, Max being one of them. And so it just seemed like a really neat place to kind of meet some of these people. That's all. I'll stop babbling.
Great. I was going to say, Maxwell, for you, it's like 6 degrees of separation. You are not new to Roy at all. You've been here for receptions to support other artists in your group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been aware of Roy since about 2017 when I moved to Columbus, and a lot of my peers have shown at Roy. Yeah.
Great. Well, it's nice to have you in. Have we closed the circle? Is it your whole group now that's shown at Roy Max, or is there somebody still out there that we need to reach out to?
People keep coming to Columbus, so yeah.
That's good. The more the better. We could use all the creative economy we can get here in Columbus. We've made a concerted effort over the years, I feel like, to really retain creatives that find their way to Columbus and go to school here, but then we really like it when they stay and continue to enrich our cultural landscape by staying here and creating here. So that's really wonderful. It's sort of like migration, right, of creatives. We love it. So I just have a few questions that we typically ask for artists, and some things that particularly I'm wanting to ask each of you about your work that we have here at Roy. So let's start with what's integral to your work. Either a space or a mindset or materials. What do you have to have in order to be able to create, and how do you find time to create? And we'll go in reverse order. Max.
All right. Gosh, that's a big topic. I would say that over the last 2 years since the pandemic started, I've been really interested in kind of natural sciences and ecology, which was kind of born out of my time spent at OSU, which was researching kind of site-specific lore to either specific story structures or even within Ohio. But I began to expand that as I moved around to different residencies and places that had both significant cultural origin stories, such as Aramont in Tennessee, which is a stone's throw from like Dolly World, so kind of more contemporary, to I spent a fall in Florida, which had incredible natural landscapes and interesting human interaction that I've been really focused on. And I grew up in Maine, and I was really focused on farming. So I've been also kind of reaching into my past, which I've noticed is a through line with a lot of the other artists in the show, to kind of bring in and kind of reprocess these things that have kind of contributed to who we are. And a lot of that has been in spaces of negotiation with nature. And for me, that would like be most obviously my garden, which I go to almost every day when the weather's nice. And yeah, I basically began breaking that garden down into elemental pieces and considering it in new ways of what the garden's attachment to my neighborhood, to myself, to my community is. And I literally brought pieces of it into the gallery to share. And I titled my piece Neighborhood, a lot about the experience of gardening, particularly through the pandemic. When especially early on, when it was very unclear and I had a lot more free time, it was a really, it was a special place of healing that was a place I could go to and see progress every day, which I think is common among many artists that they seek in their studio, is this continual kind of chipping away at making things. And I also began to examine the garden in more conceptual ways beyond food production and all these. As I had time to research with the pandemic going on, all these plants, both invasive and local, have incredible cultural stories related again to my interest in folklore and origin and, you know, what belongs where, and, you know, ultimately assembling our new reality and who we are as we change and move through this collectively. So again, my area is called Neighborhood, and it's it's about being very close and attached to both people and stories and plants, but also my desire for it as it was taken away briefly, and now at a point where it comes and goes with waves of cases. So
Interesting, because quite a few people the conversations that we've had as they've observed your work and interacted with it have been those kinds of conversations. Where did the plants come from? Are they native to Ohio? Oh, that's really interesting. Do some of them really just grow in water like that? And then, also how the work is structured in a high rise, sort of alluding to your, relationship observations with us and nature and how we're getting further and further away from it, but also people who are starting to share stories about their own experience nurturing plants, right? And they can't grow things, or they can grow things, or whatever. But it's been really interesting having those kinds of conversations. I think, certainly the pandemic has sort of brought us back to focus on what's available, what's near, what we've been ignoring for a while. When you're staying at home, you're starting to look at, your home differently, your yard differently, what you're growing differently. So yeah, have you noticed you're having more and more conversations with people about gardening and plants than you had before?
Definitely. One of the biggest perks of it is I've begun trading seeds with neighbors.
Yeah.
And it has been kind of a new way of connecting with people, and also a new way of expressing care for my community.
Yeah, that's nice. I noticed Franklinton Farms is having a seed exchange on February 5th. So it's, just on the other side of 315 from where we are. And it's really wonderful to have, someone in the neighborhood who's very concerned about access to food, healthy food, where we grow our food, how we grow our food. So
yeah, they do great work.
Yeah, they really do. That's wonderful. Okay, thank you. Nathan, to you. Thinking about what's integral to your work and how you make time to create.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like being an artist during a global pandemic has, as someone who, I guess a lot of my work is installation and sculpture, and when I was in grad school, we lost our studio for, I feel like it was like 5 months or 5 or 6 months. We lost access to our studio and most of the fabrication areas, and during that time, I had to come up with a way to still make work without a studio and without a lot of space. And so I did like a large series of drawings, which no one was expecting. And so it felt kind of fun and I kind of made an installation out of the large drawings. So I was still able to work with space in the long run, and think about it. But let's see here. But it also made me think a lot about what I depend on material wise, and what kind of attachments I have to, and I would like to, be able to make work under any circumstances, and just find the materials, or travel light. I love going to residencies and making work in new places. And like all the work that is in the Roy show, I packed up my little Kia Soul and drove out to New Mexico to the desert, and I wasn't able to bring back large things. And so I had to find a way to make work, or to be able to have evidence of work that I made, which can go in a gallery. And so as a way of sharing my research, sharing my work with other people. And so I had a bunch of the large sheets of paper that left over from that drawing project, and I brought those to New Mexico, and I pretty much just brought flat things, and then I found objects that I could use when I was there. So I was engaging with the site directly. I found objects to make prints of, and then I also, I built things on land with things that were already there, and then documented those. And then, so the documentation is what you see of some of the work. That's a great way to work. It's I was inspired by things like Robert Smithson was doing, back when with these, he'd need to show something in New York, and couldn't bring these like land works or whatever massive project to the gallery. So he found these, and lots of people do it now, but this was one of the first people to show documentation of site-based work in a gallery in really interesting ways. And so with these non-site pieces, and so I was inspired by that, and I wanted to kind of do my own version of that. Yeah, I like to think that I can just work out of a duffel bag, or with nothing at all hardly, and just find a way to make the work no matter what. And so it's nice to have like a bunch of lumber or whatever you might need for particular projects, but to be able to work with almost nothing, or in a kind of nomadic way. And so it felt good to pull it off. And so I feel like this show is me kind of, just really just dealing with the bare essentials of what I needed. So there's no frills. There's no frills at all, like everything. And I'm not showing all the work that I made in New Mexico, because that was another thing, is kind of just paring it down to the essentials. And it's like, I showed my two strongest cyanotypes, a lot of them didn't work out well. Some of them were just okay. So I feel like what you're seeing is like kind of the best sampling of the work that I did this over the summer. And I like to be able to kind of just as a way of integrating, as a way of engaging with like a site or a new region, to kind of just go with what you find or what's available there and find some way to make it work. And, just as artists in a pandemic, you kind of just got to go with the flow and make work any way you can. So
I'm always amazed at you all and your resilience, artists in general, and just creatives really figuring out a way to get it done, even if it means you have to pivot, or if you don't have access to materials that you're used to working with, to create something out of what you do have access to. We've had great conversations with artists who've talked about, the way they used to work, they can't for whatever reason. They don't have access to materials or to a space, but still the desire and the drive to create is present. And I'm always just amazed at you all and your ability to find time and inspiration to create. It's so needed. When people come into the gallery, you can see them visibly relax. They take a deep breath, they walk around the space, they really enjoy it. So all of your labor and your imagination and your determination are absolutely valued by the people who come in to see your work. So I'll take this opportunity to say thank you for that. Thank you for continuing to find a way to create. Katherine, to you, what's integral to you in your work, and because it really is specific in terms of where you're finding these objects and these connections that you have here in the gallery particularly. And I know for you, we've had this conversation, your work right now is it 10 different shows? No kidding. Like 3 different shows at the same time?
Three different right now. They're
Really?
spread out. There's a lot of work everywhere.
That's a lot.
It is to have things at once, but it's fun. I mean, it's fun to think about how, where when work is in different space, how, you have different expectations or different sort of, I call them contingent events, which is always like, that's a sculptor term, right? That what is the contingent event of the person, the viewer in that relationship with the work. So it's fun to see the work in different places. It's exciting.
Yeah.
This is a good question. And I am very jealous of Nathan and his ability to work out of a duffel bag. I so badly wish I was that kind of artist. I so badly wish I was that flexible. But I actually find that I work best or find that, at least even recently, I should say, I in order to make anything, I find that I do need some sort of designated space. Which, as a painter, I can theoretically work anywhere there's a tabletop, right? I can theoretically work anywhere I can put something on a wall and work on it. But I have had a really hard time working anywhere but a designated studio. And I'm very grateful to have a studio space where I am in Cincinnati right now. There's a neighborhood called Camp Washington, and there's an old warehouse that was renovated for studio spaces recently. I moved back to the Cincinnati area in 2019 after completing my MFA in North Carolina. And I was able to kind of get in on a group of these studios that were being put together, that were kind of being this warehouse that was being refurbished. We moved in on March 1st of 2020 to open up this sort of new collective studio space together. It was so exciting. And we were anticipating a very different spring than the one we got.
Yes.
But I found that in that time period, my studio space was the only other place I went other than my own home for almost a year.
Yeah.
Which was common for a lot of people, right? That for me, I had a place I could go and close the door, which was hugely helpful for my mental sanity at that time. I think that having a ritual of even going into a studio space, being able to walk through the doorway, was a really critical step in allowing me to have mental space to create. So I wish I was the kind of artist that was very flexible and could work anywhere at any time. And I've realized, sadly, at least at this point in my life, I am not. I think I depend more on those ritual experiences. And maybe it could be the situation, like Nathan and Maxwell said, like the pandemic has been really eye-opening. I think it's forced us to contend with our ways of making in new ways. I think for me, I realized that I need that space to clear out a mental space.
Yeah.
I was teaching through a lot of through 2020 and 21. I teach at a university, at Northern Kentucky University, and a few other universities as an adjunct, and it was a very hard time to be working. I think I was very jealous of a lot of other artists who maybe found that they had more time at home to contemplate or create. And I felt the opposite. I felt so mentally and emotionally overwhelmed and drained and overworked. It was very hard to try to teach artists, foundational studio classes through a screen for a year, sometimes more than a year and a half. It was really challenging and just really, in many ways, it was really depressing. It was just very hard. And so for me, being able to walk through the door of my studio, even if I had no energy left to make anything, being able to walk into that space and be present felt like an enormous accomplishment. And so I've learned that having designated space has been pretty critical. I also find that as a painter, I'm very materially fastidious and like a lot of painters, but a lot of object or materials based makers. I like having all my ingredients out. I like having all my stuff around.
Yes.
I think it's right. I like to feel like I think a lot of painters understand this, but a lot of I don't know, materials-based artists get this, that it feels like alchemical. You feel like the alchemist coming in with being able to make something out of all of your ingredients, bring something out of nothing. So I like seeing a bunch of my stuff around. So I found that those are actually more essential to me than I realized before. Even if I don't love that about myself, it is the way it is.
I think 2020 was a year of clarity, right? You figured out what was important to you, what wasn't important to you, relationships, materials, methods of working, places where you lived or traveled. What did you make time for? Ruin is a gift. That was a really powerful thing for us to all learn. What do we make time for? That's where our priority lies. When you are laying things out in your studio space, do certain objects have certain colors to them? So for instance, if you're painting an object that's a chair or shoes, do they have a color associated with them? Because you choose different colors for your different paintings. What dictates what?
I am not quite so systematic about it, but I will say I think a lot of my I had a really wonderful mentor once mention this in passing, and I think it's really interesting that particularly in painting, but I think this maybe applies to other mediums as well, that paintings color palettes are often references to time periods, that you can attach time periods to common color palettes that are maybe commonly understood or are even with artistic historical knowledge that seem applicable or seem fitting, that color is often what gives painting a time. And so I think I was working very intuitively. I started some of these paintings back in 2019. Some of them are very recent, but that's really the span of time in which I've worked on these. And I've, again, been working intuitively, not as intentionally with color, but I'm noticing the pattern that a lot of these sort of lighter pastel colors are influenced by my grandparents' home, which is still decked out in a lot of 50s, 60s, 70s decor. And I think a lot of the palette comes from that place. It's maybe a personal nostalgic, result. It could be, a strange sort of reference to, Northeastern suburbia in that time period. I can't really say for sure, and I also think for me, colors has been the act of limiting color, becoming more monochromatic with these works, has been a choice I've made with the intention of making softer paintings, of making really sensitive and subtle paintings. And so the more you compress your value range, the more you compress your color range and palette, the more you have to be sensitive, the more subtle you have to become, and that also emphasizes that subtlety, right? When you've got this limited space, you've got such a narrow space to look that those subtle moments become bigger. Sure. It amplifies the room for us to kind of take in those subtleties.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, wonder how Pantone Color of the Year will influence artists moving forward. They'll only work in.
You do wonder. You do wonder. It's always interior designers, I think, who catch on first. But I do wonder if there's a relationship.
Yes, just as we look fondly at pink tile in the bathrooms and pistachio appliances, we'll say, "Oh yes, yeah, interesting." Okay, so moving to Nicole then. Same question to you about what's integral to your work and how do you find time to create?
Yeah, this is I'm coming at like a fun point in the conversation. I've really enjoyed hearing everyone else reflect on it, because those questions of time and space and really what you need to create are things that I've been reflecting on as an artist. I'm primarily sculptor and installation based, and so for me materials are really integral to my process, and I have to have those things in front of me, and kind of the central process and kind of praxis of what I do is combining natural materials that I'll get from the garden or houseplants that I have that have died, or the woods, and then kind of seeing how I can situate them or combine them with materials that are found in our built environments, whether it's concrete or bronze or resin or things that I find in hardware dumpsters or scrap yards. So a studio has been really important to me. And so I kind of find myself relating to a lot of the stuff that Katherine says, where like as a person, I'm pretty transient and nomadic in my interests, and I love traveling. I love going to residencies. It really fuels what I do and is a real goal of mine to kind of just live as nomadically and see as much as possible. But I found that like the need for like a studio space where I can come back to and really like sit back and see how things interrelate and how they talk to each other and kind of have that space to play around has kept me like really grounded in Columbus, especially just because things are so affordable here. Like for me, I'm extremely lucky to have like a studio in my basement in my house. And so I've always kind of had that like dream of moving out to like California or the Pacific Northwest because of the art scenes there and because I'm an avid hiker and the nature is like so much better there than it is here. And that's such a big part of my life and my studio practice. But the need for affordable studio space has really kept me grounded. And I think what's been interesting in this show and like in this point of my life, the show is kind of the amalgamation of all the work I made at Sculpture Space Residency for the last 2 months. So it's been really, really fun getting to just come back and like immediately see that work in a gallery and have it be in conversation with other artists' works. But what I found being a sculpture space was just like an interesting experience of like getting to expand my work. My studio at home is like, it's a basement studio, so it's not huge and all of my stuff is crammed in there. And then I went to Sculpture Space and had this like studio that was basically like a mini gallery, and I really had the space to like expand and just have my materials like laid out everywhere and kind of just really get to like experiment and have enough like white blank space to see how things were operating. And I feel like it was like really critical and kind of pushing me out of like the way that I had been working. Like I think a lot of people I've talked to as creatives can relate of like struggling to kind of find like motivation or time to create through the global crisis. And I definitely kind of like went through periods where I didn't make, and then kind of got into a series that I was in for a while where I wanted to kind of like break out of it. And that was more like two-dimensional work. And so I found that like getting to go to a residency and just having like the time and like all the white space and like a bunch of like wood shop and metal shop facilities was like really integral to kind of helping me like bring the work forward more. And kind of the interesting challenge in that as well is like in my ideal world, like I love to work large and extravagant and what's the word I'm looking for? Like really difficult to pull off illustrations and sculptures and installations. And when I was doing my undergrad, I would never really consider like the logistical things of like putting things in cars, and I'd be making like 3-foot statues out of bronze or like almost like room size installations. And that's like the funnest way to work for me and something that I've had to like navigate as a post-grad artist. And that was kind of the challenge of Sculpture Space, where you go there and it's like a sculptor's paradise and you have like everything that you could possibly want. And I'm trying to navigate like okay, like what am I going to bring to this, like fitting my studio and like the materials that I have into my Honda Civic, and then like B, bringing it back was a really big challenge, because part of me was like, oh yeah, I can go crazy and make like big welded metal sculptures, but then I'm like, how am I gonna get that across the country in my Honda Civic? So that was kind of an interesting conundrum there. And I guess it was fun to like sourcing materials from the local environment. Like I had brought kind of a collection of like dried plant materials, like dead house plants that I had saved, and just various things that like I know I need to make. But a lot of the work in my show at Roy came from like stuff that I found in scrap yards in Utica, New York. And in the mountains. Like I have some bark that I found out on a hike and dragged like 2 miles down a mountain in the dark because I had to have it. But yeah, I mean, it was fun.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
That is a question actually that I've had with visitors to the gallery. You know, I guess it's a Duchampian question, right? Like, how do you decide what comes into the gallery and what doesn't come into the gallery? Are you thinking about a particular material or a particular installation, and then you walk and you find those materials, or do the materials find you, or is it sort of a combination of those things? How do you arrive at, you know, partially wood turned pieces that speak to you and they're going to be a wonderful installation on a shelf in a gallery?
That's a good question. The materials really find me. Like I worked for, like all through my undergrad, I worked at garden centers. And so that was a huge influence on me, where I would just collect and collect and collect dried flowers. And I still have like buckets of those in my studio that I've kind of been working with in various ways over the years. And other materials I'll just find on hikes or in dumpsters or scrap yards. And I found that's like really how my process works, where I have to like be doing and be working with those materials before the idea kind of hits me. Like, I don't think I ever really like sit down and I'm like, okay, this is what this is going to be and this is how it's going to go. Like with the pieces in the show, like I found the shelving at a scrapyard and was kind of like, okay, this is interesting and it can be something. And then found bark out on a hike like a week or two later and kind of was like, oh, that's what I've been waiting for, where I need the space. And so I need the space so I can like sit on materials and kind of have them like wait for their pairing or wait for that moment where I kind of have the like, aha, this is how it's going to go.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, you know, for, just for point of reference, Roy is a juried space, and so artists apply to be here, and the jurors then review all those applications, and through a series of scores and processes, we arrive at the artist whose work will be invited. Then we have a curatorial team that puts all the work together for exhibition, looking at similar themes and that sort of thing, putting shows together. And so as I'm listening to each of you and how you're discussing this, I definitely want to give kudos to our curatorial team who saw all of these connections between your works. When you all were working here together, because you didn't know each other necessarily beforehand or worked with each other beforehand, what kinds of things did you learn about yourselves as creators and about each other as creators as you came to the same space in order to put together an exhibition? I don't really have a person to start with. Anybody can jump in on that.
I think it's,
oh, go ahead.
I think it's definitely been a fun group to work with, because like kind of seeing the connections between our work, and we've really had like interesting conversations, I think, in this dialogue and amongst ourselves about kind of the relationship with it. And I think what stood out to me is kind of the ways the work is like somewhat a response to the pandemic and, you know, a society that is in late stage capitalism and crisis. That's been really interesting for me, is like we're all kind of responding to that crisis in like very different ways, but that's kind of like the underlying thing that I've been seeing of like even in this conversation. So
I was going to say that we didn't have any sort of indication of maybe why we were all put together. Like we were not told why we were kind of, you know what I mean? There was no like written statement of why we were juried to be together in the same space. And so that was actually kind of fun for us to discover. I think we did meet over Zoom. Was it in December, when we were trying to plan and talk to each other about what types of work we'd be including, what sort of space we would need for all these works. And I think in doing that, we took time to kind of tell each other a little bit about our practices, about our you know, larger themes or ideas, and kind of in doing that, we sort of found these amazing threads, and that we saw kind of woven through our work, that it was fun to discover that together. I can't speak for everybody. I thought it was really exciting to kind of find these common themes or common threads, and also to note how differently we all approach these notions of space or place, specificity or non-specificity, to some degree, presence or absence or progress, processing grief and processing life, and how both of those things change over time. I think there were so many amazing common threads that I found kind of in talking about our work and looking at each other's work. But it was a fun discovery. I think we spent a lot of time preparing the space together, and as we were installing and trying to be thoughtful about those interwoven themes, in addition to just kind of placing our own work so that it was well displayed, but also trying to think about how the space allowed viewers to make some of those connections too.
Yeah. Great. Max or Nathan?
You want to go first?
Go ahead, and I'll say something after you.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I really liked about the show as a whole was there's this interesting cadence and language throughout all of the pieces of this this breathing room, and then this like information density, where I think there's these really interesting wormholes all over the place. Like I think about Nicole's piece of wood with this, if you walk by it too quickly, you don't see it. There's this really intricate, I believe it's chewing gum mixed with other materials that creates this little landscape inside it. And then Katherine has these objects in her paintings which totally transform also in the landscape in place for me. And then Nathan has these objects on display on a shelf, and then again a print above it. And there's this amazing language, I think, that runs not only between the individual pieces, but as you move through the space, that I've really enjoyed. And yeah, it was really fun kind of finally meeting. We met for the first time pretty much in person installing the show. That's one thing I've really liked about this show, is that I've been able to meet people who have really been actually close to my current community, both physically and I have friends who know all of you, I'm sure. So that's been a really interesting connection, on top of the just the strange connections to the show. And to me, it's also kind of thinking back on the pandemic. It's also this like weird experience of time we're having, where we're not sure how much time's passed.
Right.
Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's brief, and sometimes so much happens, and then there's extreme periods of boredom, and it's really messed with my ability to pay attention. And I've noticed the way that I look at things and move through space has changed dramatically. And I think unconsciously that has worked its way into at least how I set up my space, and then definitely my own experience walking through the space as a whole.
Oh, I wanted to note that I would not, so Max is recently kind of living a little bit in Cincinnati, a little bit in Columbus these days, but it was so fun. I would not have met you otherwise. You were able to come and visit the studio space, and it was fun to connect with you here, in addition to in Columbus, that we have sort of this dual city exchange. And we would not have maybe met had it not been for this particular exhibition.
Literally, I think your studio is like a mile from my apartment.
So cool. What amazing serendipity.
Yes, our artists who exhibited here in November, one is originally from Seattle, the other is originally from Wisconsin. Unbelievably, they live 15 minutes from each other in Brooklyn. They did not even know that. So yeah, Roy, bringing people together. Roy connects. Yeah. Nathan, to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting. When so when Lynette, when you sent us like like image packets,
Mhm.
of each other's work so we could familiarize. At first, when I saw Max's work, I was like, how does Max fit in? And I mean, and it wasn't like a dead no, but it was like, is there some
How?
like because it was because the work that ended up in the gallery was a bit different from a lot of the images that he applied with. And I was just curious. I was and but I saw the range. You know, I did a little bit of research, and I saw the range of Max's work, and then it really hit when I saw images of the last show that you did with Hannah, with like the plant materials and stuff, and I was like, okay, clear connection, you know. And then when we got together, that's when all the lights went off, because we all saw connections when we got together to talk for the first time. It took us a little while to get together, and but what you call it, so Katherine, I got to go see Hilma off Klint's show at the Guggenheim.
I was able to see that show as well.
Okay.
So
So I have only been to New York one time, and I went to the Guggenheim to see this Hilma af Klint show and got a slice of pizza and walked the High Line. Those are the three things that I did. And then went on I just stopped there, and I was on a trip, and so got on the plane and left. But one thing I've been kind of saying to myself, and I don't even know if I've said it to another human being, but your paintings reminded me of her work, like that, the sacred that is, and the softness that's in some of her work. And so your paintings reminded me of like Hilma af Klint was painting in her grandmother's house. And and I feel like there's this sense of the sacred and ephemerality and all these things that are in your work, which I feel kind of like there's little wafts of that through the rest of our things. But I especially felt a connection because we were both making work about people dear to us who are no longer with us, if I'm correct, and kind of as a way of remembering, as a way of honoring, and the other strange connections were, and like Max, you're all the little creatures in Steubenville, Wisconsin. Is that Steubenville? That to me, like I like you're kind of like documenting these little creatures in a place that you're at. So like this, like the sense of the site, and it was made on site, and a lot of Nicole's work was, it's I mean, like using found objects, Nicole, that you brought with yourself to a place, but then finding other things there to engage with. I could really relate to that. If you even look at the one collage in the show, some of those images I've been dragging around for 15 years, that are in that collage, and some of them so it's kind of like this sort of palimpsest of images that I've been carrying with me for a while, and then like dead plants show up, and like off. I'm maybe not so much in Katherine's work, but the other three of us, there's a botanical specimen evidence of things that were alive, and well, I guess Max's are a lot of those are still alive, but it's like thinking about you know, kind of the connection between things, and I'm not really putting in words that well, but there's like a clear connection between our work, like these little dovetails that are happening, and it's been really wonderful. And but I feel like the curatorial committee folks who put us together, they were kind of like intuitive and psychic in a way, like and
yeah,
especially predicting.
I'll mention that to them. We
Right.
we got the results from the jury and spent 2 weeks coming up with different scenarios of different shows, and then each of us, and then we all met and shared what we thought for exhibitions, and then some of them stayed that way, some of them moved around a little bit, but we had really wonderful discussions about themes and materials and you know, perspectives. And so it was really wonderful, very, very thoughtfully done. And I'm very grateful to the team for putting that together. It was something new that we did this year. Jurors were involved, art history majors, some of our interns, board members. So it was a really good team. I think we'll definitely look to doing that again next year. And I'm glad to have the feedback, because that helps me then thinking forward about how we do things at Roy. We do have a question for all of you. How do you all prepare for your residencies? Do you make work before you go to prepare, or do you start off with brand new work when you arrive?
I can start this, but this is such a specific question to specific artists. I know in the past when I've done residencies, I mentioned earlier, like I like to have kind of all my equipment, and personally I've known this about myself. I am very dependent on a lot of ritual when I work, because and I also have to again, because of the nature of my work, it's required a certain level of planning. So for me, I actually prep a lot of panels. I expect to be working mostly on panels, and I prep a lot of them in advance, and I try to bring as much equipment as I can with me. And I, had varying degrees of that, where I've done that in a couple of different places, but I try to prepare a lot of surfaces and bring those surfaces ready to be worked upon. Sometimes I bring in progress work in case I get there and feel really stuck, which is not, I don't know, maybe you, the three of you have done maybe more residencies than I have. I think I've only done 2, but it may depend on the place and your specific medium. For me, it's preparing surfaces and usually bringing at least one in progress work to help me connect where I've come and into that new space. But I'm sure the rest of you have more interesting answers than I do.
I would say that's a solid response. Yeah, and it depends a lot on the residency. In the past, I've been really specific to ceramics, and that's really limited my ability to go to certain places because it's so heavy on equipment, really expensive equipment that a lot of residencies don't have. I believe the website ResArtists allows you to search by medium, which is useful, but and equipment. But yeah, I've been trying to open myself to other materials, and also, like, personally, I've been really interested in responding to the specific ecologies of the places I've been going to. So I try to go as open as possible while also preparing and being willing to kind of go either way. And I think flexibility is key to really maximizing your time at a residency.
Yeah, I've known artists who go to residencies with nothing intentionally, that they actively say, I refuse to bring anything with me. I will only work with what I can get there. And that's a very bold strategy, but some amazing work can come out of that because you're forced to, really work in the present, which I think is a cool strategy. I have not done that, but it's an option.
Yeah, I only brought a box of clay to Steuben, and it just happened that there was 5 pallets of old molds for slip casting behind a barn, and I went through all of them, and I pressed hundreds of little pieces which are now attached to the panel piece.
Yeah,
and they're mostly of animals and plants, kind of all broken up together, which creates a whole ecology.
Nice. fortuitous. Okay.
I think for me, I can relate to Katherine where I wanted to bring like enough in terms of just like ideas of like what I could do or materials that I wouldn't get there and be like, oh God, I have 2 months to make, like now what do I do? But I also think it is good to kind of just like be flexible and like let things happen. Like it's kind of like a weird thing because a lot of residencies like asks you for project proposals. And I think like depending on what you're doing material wise, it can be good to like kind of go into it with an idea of what you want to do. But for me, like kind of going to a new place and like almost like limiting myself and kind of having to like respond to like, okay, like what can I fit in my car in terms of what I bring and what I bring back was like helpful and like creating the work that I did and kind of like expanding and finding a new direction.
Yeah, I just want to say limiting yourself is good with residencies, just paring it down. I went to one residency and all I took some quinoa bags. I was working at a co-op. The like big ones. I took quinoa bags, microfilm, and old photographs. And that's all I took. And I'd found stuff there and did a lot of the stuff I brought I didn't even use. So
Interesting. Okay, another question from the audience. Is there any particular artist or artists that have influenced your creative process? And then I had a question about what artists are you following? So I was thinking more in terms of like Instagram for inspiration and things like that. But so combining those two questions, who do you follow? Who inspires you? You've name dropped a little, Nathan. You can start.
Yeah, I tell you, a lot of the people that I like are like, yeah. So I mentioned Robert Smithson, and I mean, and I was also working in the Southwest, so a lot of those like land artists and site folk there's a lot of site-based work that happens in places like Marfa, Texas, and Utah and New Mexico, but I would say, well, to tell you the truth, like the cyanotypes, I have a lot of interest in the beginnings of photography. And so some of the first prints that were ever made were botanists, like documenting like plants. And I find so I'll just maybe talk about cyanotypes. But so like I found that making cyanotypes in a way where you're placing objects directly on the paper is very sculptural and as a neat way of documenting objects. And so I was kind of just riffing, doing my take on this like really early alternative photography method, but also inspired by like site-based artists or who are showing evidence of their work in a gallery space. So.
Great. Are you following anybody on Instagram for inspiration?
Yeah, I follow a lot of art folk, and it's interesting. Just and I like a lot of work that's not like mine, too. And so I'm just interested in work that's kind of pushing limits with things and work that seems free. And so let's see here. But to tell you the truth, like some of the artists that I've been admiring through Instagram have ended up at Roy G. Biv. And so so that was one of the things that sort of led me. And I mentioned my friend Choi, and I've been a fan of like actually Max's partner, Hannah Parrott's work. Yeah, so I've been interested in some of these like OSU grads and adjacent, like Columbus adjacent artists, and it's been nice to meet some folks that are making work in Ohio and Columbus and greater Columbus area, Cincinnati and whatnot, and because I will be living there hopefully in the early summer, so
That's good.
yeah, so
I can maybe offer up a few. I probably, like a lot of us, look at a ton of work all the time. It's hard to simplify or to nail down a few things here or there. I personally draw a lot of inspiration from iconography, Russian Orthodox iconography, some of the European traditional art history, like, I hate using the term master artist. I actually don't love that term, but like, I love Angelico or Vermeer, actually, as a amazing composer. But in a contemporary sense, there's a lot of different artists that I follow and love. I would recommend a group that I follow a lot on, I think does a great job at promoting a ton of good work on Instagram, is the Coastal Post, which I recommend to anyone who's looking to get a broad stroke of a lot of different kinds of work. So I would recommend that as a really great source if you're on Instagram. That's been one that I found a lot of amazing artists working today, rather than try to go through and name a ton. I will plug some Ohio artists who I really admire and love. Sam Herring is working here in Cincinnati, Samantha Herring, Emil Robinson, Charlie Goring, Evan Hansen is a Cincinnati alum, but he's working in New York now. Those are some of artists who I look to as contemporaries and really, really admire their work, and I'm regularly kind of checking on what they're doing and how they're working. I know that Samantha Herring actually has a show at OSU up at the same time right now. So if you're in Columbus, you're looking at this work, I would encourage you to go check out that work as well. I don't know exactly which gallery she's in, but she's around. You can Google it, I'm sure.
Great, yeah. We have a great group in town called Artists of 614, which is our area code here. And they're always posting about what they're doing next and getting feedback. And it's just inspiring to see what other people are doing. So, yeah. Max or Nicole, question to you. Who are you following? Yeah. Who inspires you?
I can jump in. I kind of have like a group of artists that I've been looking at over the years. Definitely the land artists and like the Art Povera movements with like Giuseppe Pannone and like Anna Mendieta and just various like conceptual artists. But it's definitely been fun like over the last few years, like meeting people in my like peer group and state who have really incredible work that I admire, and I feel like we're kind of running adjacent careers. Like Hannah Bates was at Roy like last year, and we like missed each other at CCAD. Like I think I had a few encounters with her, but her work is like really incredible, and I feel like we do like ridiculously similar stuff, and I've been wanting to do a show with her for like a long time now. So definitely her. And then Kelly Bornhoft from OSU is another person that I really admire, doing work about like the environment and the climate crisis. And it was funny enough to like at my residency at Sculpture Space, like I don't think they really like curated our cohorts, and the girl that I really like felt connected with and her work being on like similar themes was like actually rescheduled with me, but we were just there at the same time, and she was doing like a lot of very similar stuff with found materials and dirt and the natural environment. And I feel like she definitely had some of an influence on a few of the pieces in the show for sure. So it's been fun like connecting with people in the same dialogue at this weird moment of ecological disaster, making that kind of work. So
yeah, I'm both encouraged and frightened by that fact. I'm encouraged that you all found each other. I am frightened that that is an aspect, right? There's plenty of space to explore.
Yeah, I think that's the work right now that's being made.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go last real quick. I really like the works of Grayson Perry. He's a bit too big and too old to be on social media, but he is on the internet. He's got a show on BBC now through the pandemic, but I was inspired by his ceramics, but I think he does a really great job of kind of attaching story and meaning to objects and producing them in a way that they're open enough that they're very approachable, which I think has contributed to his success. I really enjoy his Wreath Lecture series. I think he did it like 10 years ago. They're really good. They're made into podcasts now.
There's a good documentary floating around.
He's got several.
Yeah. I read one of the memoirs too,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's married to a psychologist, so I think he can steal some ideas.
Now it's making sense.
I think she guides him a little bit, but and then I've really enjoyed and I've been inspired by Jenny Odell, who is both a visual artist but also a really fantastic writer.
Oh, Max, I am reading her book a second time right now. I second that inspiration. She is an amazing researcher.
Yeah, she did the Recology residency just before I did, and she's from the Bay Area. And I need to read her book though.
Yeah,
but that's so cool.
It's on. She does a great job, and I feel like we can all relate to her bit where she's covering a lot of topics, but she gets some really interesting through lines by kind of exploring so many things with such a broad and open scope. So I would really suggest her book, and she also has got plenty of talks on the internet.
I second that. There are so many names I would want to just continue throwing out there. There are so many people I want to recommend, and it's hard to stop.
I'm a big Gordon Matta Clark freak. If you ever have a chance to look at,
he's on my list.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stick to my Ohio ones because that seems the most doable. And I was thinking Anne Hamilton feels like a like titan of the artist world, and I feel we're so lucky to have her in Ohio.
Yes,
she's been a huge inspiration to me. I
try not to gush when I see her at things, but it's hard not to. So yeah.
It's just the truth.
I'd plug the Dream Clinic crew, which is a new group in Columbus, and they run they call it the Tiny Pedestal. They'll show artists for just a few days at a time. It's a great way to show your work in town. But they're I believe Morgan Free and Payton are showing at Roy pretty soon as well.
Next month. They're showing with Phoenix Brown, and our Roy talk with them is on February 27th at 3:00. So shameless plug, but nonetheless, yes. So that's cool.
I'm gonna try to go to the opening. I'm trying to get work off for it. So.
February 11th is that one. All right, well, in the time remaining, we've gone, normally these conversations are about an hour, so we've kind of gone over that time, but it's been really wonderful to catch up with all of you and have these great conversations. So I appreciate that. I did want to give you a moment to promote yourselves, right? What's next? Plug your next show. Where's your work going to be after it's at Roy?
Sorry.
I'm recovering, so I will I won't be showing until next summer. So
some time. Well, you got to give time for growth, I suppose, right? Or
for the next show.
I do not have any shows planned. Actually, thankfully, I'm grateful to not maybe have any immediate shows coming up, but I do have plans. I have an interview that's going to be coming out with Side by Side Contemporary, which is a online platform and publication. So that's coming out in February.
Great.
And then I'm Nathan, maybe you've said that you've been to Vermont Studio Center. I will be there this summer, hopefully, if all goes well. I had a residency scheduled for 2020, which has been delayed each year since. So hopefully this is the summer that it happens. So that is currently on the docket. Fingers crossed I am there this summer. So.
And you're taking a mason jar, an old catcher's mitt, and
nothing else.
I'm gonna write some tough rules for you.
They have some nice painting studios. So yeah, just bring a few panels and a half-finished painting and your paints and brushes. You'll be good.
Excited. I'm excited. I've heard so many wonderful things about that space. So
yeah, it's great.
Looking forward to
I'm
it.
applying to some residencies right now. I'm hoping to follow Nicole's footsteps and go to sculpture space. And so I've got an application there, and I'm looking at some upcoming ones. But I'm trying to I'm trying to come up with my next, body of work that I want to work on, and maybe just create a show and then find a place to show it. So so just yeah, so keep tabs on Instagram. I'm just Byrne Nate is my handle in there, and actually so yeah, look me up there, folks. The article that Joel Oliphant wrote on me, I just put the link in there for that if anyone here is interested. Columbus Live did a little piece on the work I have in this show. So yeah. Anyways, it's been an honor to show with everyone. Oh yeah, Nicole, did you? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll do my plug. I have a show opening at Global Gallery Coffee Shop up in Clintonville.
Yeah.
That'll be up all for February. I don't have a hard reception yet, but I want to say it's going to be like probably Friday, February 18th. And then in the summer, I'm doing a show at Rosewood Gallery in Dayton, Ohio. So yeah, got stuff happening, which is fun after like the COVID, like nothing doing. Yeah, so I'm just applying to a bunch of residencies as well. Like all the deadlines are happening now. So it's been a fun time of just constantly writing applications.
Yeah, you kind of get in that mindset, like brochure speak, right? As you're starting to almost speak about yourself in the third person, like, oh, wait, hold on. That's not where I want to be. Yeah.
I don't know if people can relate to this or not, but for me, it feels like one or the other, where like I'm either like super duper focused on like writing applications and finding opportunities and kind of getting that side of being an artist together, or I'm in the studio. It's like one or the other. And I'm like, why can't it just be both? But it's like different sides of the brain operating. And so I want to be like making work right now and kind of doing my next body of work, but I'm like, it's not happening with all the applications.
Nicole, have you ever heard that saying that I think Coretta Kent is famous for? If you know Coretta Kent, that nun who was a really fantastic printmaker. She had a list of rules for the studio. She was a teacher, I believe, but one of the things that she had in her list of rules was you can make work or you can analyze work, but you can't do both at the same time.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, I think about that a lot.
Sums it up. When you're trying to like write artist statements, it's just different things happening.
Yeah, and you got to make it to show it too.
Yes.
I'm having trouble getting in the studio when it's cold, so I'm dealing with that. I'm from California, and working in a cold studio is rough.
Yeah.
So I gotta get used to that.
Yeah, my basement's freezing, so.
It is a delicate balance trying to find time to create, but also the business side of the arts, writing statements, getting your CV up to date, documenting your work. All those things are very important, but they do take time away from creating. But as you say, if you're not showing and collecting what it is that you've been making, then nobody knows what you're doing. So yeah, find time to do both. So, all right. Well, I appreciate very much the conversation tonight. It was really wonderful to talk with you all and actually see your faces because we've been working in the gallery together masked. So it's very nice to see faces. Thank you very much to people who got on the call, friends and family and fans. We appreciate that also, and the thoughtful questions that you asked. So our artists were able to respond to those. Any last minute thoughts or anything that I didn't cover that you wanted to talk about before we close?
No.
Okay, well,
I want to say thank you, Lynette. You've been an amazing resource to us and a great help throughout this entire
Yeah,
process.
thank
So
you.
thank you very much for your help and the help from all of your staff and the interns. We really appreciate it.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you so much.
yeah, you're welcome. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to be here so you can concentrate on the work. That's the important part. So I appreciate your saying that. Thank you. I'll pass that along. The exhibition is up until February 4. And so stop by the gallery. We're open Wednesday to Sunday, 12 to 6. And this conversation was recorded, as I mentioned at the beginning, and we'll post it on our YouTube channel so you can catch the rest of it there. All right, great. Thank you all so much for your kind attention and the conversation. I appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Everybody,
Yeah.
thanks for coming out.
All right, get back in the studio.
Okay.
Cold or not, let's go.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Bye all.
Bye guys. Thanks for coming.